coming to church and we notified, so I had a chance to study, which is always a good thing. But I definitely won't be before you very long, and that we have a lot going on there. But I believe that God has given us a word. So I'm going to ask that everyone please turn your Bible. The Gospel of Luke, we are going to look at chapter 1, verses 5 through 19. Historically, I don't like to read more than 10 verses, but this chapter has a plenitude of verses, over 63 verses, and everything we read is going to be germane to our thought. So once you have Luke chapter 1, verse 5, please signify with amen. There was in the days of Herod, the king of Judea, a certain priest named Zacharias of the division of Abijah. His wife was of the daughters of Aaron, and her name was Elizabeth. And they were both righteous before God, walking in all the commandments and ordinances of the Lord blameless. But they had no child, because Elizabeth was barren, and they were both well advanced in years. So it was that while he was serving as priest before God in the order of his division, according to the custom of the priesthood, his lot fell to burn incense when he went into the temple of the Lord. And the whole multitude of the people were praying outside at the hour of incense. Then an angel of the Lord appeared to him standing on the right side of the altar of incense. And when Zacharias saw him, he was troubled, and fear fell upon him. But the angel said unto him, Be not afraid, Zacharias, for your prayer is heard, and your wife Elizabeth will bear you a son. You shall call his name John, and you will have joy and gladness, and many will rejoice at his birth. For he will be great in the sight of the Lord, and shall drink neither wine nor strong drink. He will be filled with the Holy Spirit even from his mother's womb, and he will turn many of the children of Israel to the Lord their God. He will also go before him in the spirit and power of Elijah, to turn the hearts of the fathers to the children, and the disobedient to the wisdom of the just, to make ready a people prepared for the Lord. And Zacharias said to the angel, How shall I know this? For I am an old man, and my wife well advanced in years. And the angel answered and said unto him, I am Gabriel, who stands in the presence of God, and was sent to speak to you and bring you these glad tidings. But behold, you will be mute and not able to speak until the day these things take place, because you did not believe my words, which are to be fulfilled in their own time. But I ask that we skip down to verse 36 and 37. Now indeed, Elizabeth, your relative, has also conceived a son in her old age, and this is the 6th month for her who was called barren. For with God, nothing will be impossible. I'd like to read that last verse one last time, verse 37. For with God, nothing will be impossible. I'd like to use as a sermon for a fairly brief time the delay was to bring forth the impossible. The delay was to bring forth the impossible. Now, saints and friends, we see that Luke is writing this gospel as part of the two-part set of the book of Acts. Any of us who are familiar with biblical studies, or any of us who have studied various biblical writers, will understand that Luke, by being a physician, is fairly systematic in his approach to the gospel. And he's writing to Theophilus, whom most people consider to be a wealthy patron of the church, and who was able to pay for materials and things that were needed in order to write this manuscript. So in writing to Theophilus, Luke is the only one of the gospel writers who includes the birth of John the Baptist in the narrative. We don't find in the Gospel of John, the Gospel of Matthew, or the Gospel of Mark, but we do find it in Luke. So our assignment today is to find out why and friends, we have to believe everything that is in the 66 books of the Bible is in there for a reason. And so he introduces us, Luke introduces us very carefully and very meticulously to Zacharias and Elizabeth. In fact, he starts off by giving us a resume of their righteousness. We see that both of them are from priestly stock. Zacharias is the priest, meaning from the house of Aaron, and he's of the priestly order of Maya, which is an order that was considered with great respect. Out of 18,000 priests, he was in one of the more significant orders. Even his wife, Elizabeth, was also a daughter of Aaron. So if she had been male, she could have been priest, but she was female. But they both had a lineage. They both had a history. They both were individuals whose pedigree was pure. So he initially identified that there's no skeletons in the closet with these two. These two are from good families. So he breaks that down. Then we find out what their names mean. Zacharias means God remembered. Elizabeth means promise or oath of God. So you have two individuals when they were initially born, and their parents gave them a name. They were God remembers and promise of God. So how ironic is it that two individuals with names like that would be married? If anybody were to not be married, you would think they would not be married. Luke then adds a little addendum that you have to really look at to see. And it's an addendum about Zacharias' character. Once he says that Elizabeth was barren, that would have given Zacharias the right under the law to either remarry or to take an additional wife, not like Abraham and Hagar. But what he did, Zacharias didn't do. Zacharias stuck with Elizabeth, even though he had biblical right because she was barren, to attempt to get somebody who could bring forth what he wanted. So we see that even in his character, he is a good man. So Luke meticulously takes time to set up the fact that Zacharias is a good person, Elizabeth is a good person, but yet still they're married. So that brings us to the fundamental tension in the text. The text is we have two good people, two people who are spotless, two people who Luke went to an enormous amount of time for the reader to understand that these two individuals were not blessed, but it wasn't because of their own fault. Yeah. So you see, saints and friends, how could a family that is so pious be cursed by a God that they are that dedicated to? So we see, saints and friends, that Zacharias and Sarah, during that period of history, would have been thought of as cursed. Because when you weren't able to produce fruit or children, it was because God had shut up your womb. So I can see, saints and friends, Zacharias and Elizabeth being in a situation where they would walk in and talking would cease. People would see them and whisper about it. I can see them, Zacharias being the head of his family, and constantly making sacrifice unto God to take away this reproach from him and his wife. I can see Zacharias and Sarah, anytime a mistake was made, anytime they did commit a sin, they hurried and they repented and they did the appropriate sacrifice because they didn't want that sin to be holding them back. Well, saints and friends, struggle in our faith in God. So we look at it and we say, what is it that I'm doing wrong? Because I have to be doing something wrong. You see, what I like about Zacharias, he's not your regular Tom, Dick, or Harry. He's a priest. In order to be a priest in Hebrew times, he had to understand the Tanakh. The Tanakh is the Torah, the law, the Nevi'im, the prophets, and the Ketuvim was the Hebrew writings. So he was familiar with what we would call the Old Testament and what the Hebrews would call the Tanakh. So in the Bible, he understood that he was serving a God of miracles. I imagine he was quite familiar with the story of Abraham and Sarah. I imagine he was familiar with Daniel and the lion's den. He was familiar with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He was familiar with all these Hebrew stories. Yet God did it for them, but God wasn't doing it for him. So saints and friends, how do you deal when you know you serve a God that can, but it looks like he won't? Yes. How do you deal when you wake up and you're dealing with a God that is immutable, that is omnipotent? You understand whom you serve, but he's not doing it for you. And so you're walking around with a reproach that you know God could take away from you, but for some reason he won't. And so, saints and friends, that's where we find Zacharias himself. We find him as two good people whom it has been stated did nothing wrong, but yet and still they couldn't get that one thing that they wanted. So, saints and friends, I'm going to take a little bit of liberty here. And I would imagine that after a period of time, I don't know if it was 36, I don't know if it was 40, I don't know if it was 50, I don't know if it was 60. The Bible merely says they were well stricken in years. But after a period of time, they gave up. They said, you know what? I'm just going to be the best aunt and uncle I can be. I'm going to play with my nieces. I'm going to play with my nephews. Anytime somebody comes and asks me to be a godparent, I'll do it. I'll go ahead and buy these kids toys for Hanukkah. I'll go ahead and celebrate birthdays and anything I can do to be around children. I have realized that it's not going to happen for me. So I am still going to celebrate God, but with the understanding that for some reason I was chosen, some reason I was elected to be married. I was elected to go forth without fruit. I was elected to have an approach that God couldn't take away, but he won't. So I'll just resign myself to living life the best I can, and ultimately I'll die and go to heaven. And saints and friends, how many of us have something in our life that we have decided we are going to give up on? All right. Because we waited, and we waited, and we waited, but it is quite evident that God is not going to move in that area